Our sponsors: the Finley Experience, HBCU First, the Jamal Bakes Morning Show, J&J Leadership Academy. Thank you for your contributions towards the Michael Finkley Show.
I'm Francis Chule. I play Pierce in Invasive on Tubi, and you're watching the Michael Finkley Show.
HBCU First. HBCU First Incorporated is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. HBCU First is a student-led community advancing the well-being and economic participation of America's Black youth. As the leading HBCU internship and mentoring academy, we empower elite students from 70-plus historically Black colleges and universities with in-demand college-to-career skills. For more information, visit their website, www.hbcufirst.com. On the next Michael Finkley, actor Hick Cheramie tells us more about his sobriety journey.
At the age of 36, I got sober. So for 24 plus years, I was an active alcoholic.
What would you tell your 11-year-old self today?
Hug him and tell him it's gonna. Sorry. And tell him it's gonna be okay. You know.
Monday's Finkley.
There's a new familiar face this time. Say hello to the new daytime. See it everywhere you go. New and the greatest show. It's no other than the Michael Finkley Show. There is no other. He's like no other. I'm so glad that someone resonates with me. Come see the baby. It's too late to know.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Michael Finkley Show. Now, I'm very excited for my next guest because we met on these IG streets, and I tell you, and just diving deeper into his story, the story is just so inspirational that I'm like, yeah, please, let's talk about it because I have more questions and only you can answer them. He's none other than actor himself, Hick Cheramie.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm humbled and honored to be here. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for saying yes, because like I said, we met each other on these IG streets, and you just said, yeah, let's make it happen. And I'm like, yeah, all right, we're gonna talk with you, have this conversation. So I look at you and I see all the things that you're in. Right, you're in the different movies and sitcoms and different commercials and all the things that go along with it. You have this awesome beard that I can't grow. So I look at you and persons look at you and they're like, he doesn't have a story. All the good things have always happened to him, but there is a story. But where does the story begin? Take us back there.
Yeah. So, but before my acting journey, and it, it kind of goes into the beginning of my acting journey. I didn't start acting until I was 40 years old. I'm coming up on 47 in May. At the age of 36, I got sober. So for 24 plus years, I was an active alcoholic and drug addict. Experienced, a lot of the things that normally, drug addicts would experience, homelessness and whatnot. And, so I fought that battle for a long time. And one day, by the grace of God, I decided to love myself enough to not pick up a drug or drink. In December of 2014, after years and years of drug and alcohol abuse, coming from a family of drug and alcohol abuse of, generation after generation, I put an end to that generational curse and went, it said probably the three most important words that I've ever said in my life. I want help. And, kind of turned it over to God, because my way wasn't working anymore. So I turned my will and life over to care of him at the time as I understood him. And I got sober, and there was a lot of changes happening in my life after sobriety. My relationship with my kids was growing, and the relationship with my family was growing. And I did a lot of work in recovery and in, sobriety, a lot of service work and helping others struggling in this addiction. And there came a time where I was doing an actual podcast. And during this podcast, I was asked this question. And it was a podcast regarding recovery and sobriety. And they said there was anything that I ever wanted to do or dream that I had that drugs or alcohol may have, stopped me from actually achieving. And it wasn't something that I was thinking about a lot at the time. And in that moment, it just kind of came out. I was always wanted to be an actor. And the person interviewing me, my life changed that day. And I had so many beautiful changes before in my life. And he said, well, you're beating drug addiction and alcoholism. Why don't you? And I was like, wow, why don't I? So I got sober December 2014. This happened in 2018. So I was sober for a few years after building my life, building my sobriety, staying spiritually fit to where I was probably ready to pursue something besides sobriety. I had made a lot of amends. I repaired a lot of broken relationships. I repaired a lot of me and healed from a lot of trauma. So getting to that point, it was kind of eye opening because television was always important to me. Acting was always important to me, and I wasn't a theater kid. In fact, I was the guy who would get kicked out of theater class. I would get sent to theater class, and the teacher hated me, and she would kick me out. And I would get sent to theater class when my regular teacher wasn't in or missed school, so she was like an alternative teacher I would go to, and she would like kick me out every time. And sometimes I think back, I'm like, look, I understood what you were saying. I know what acting is now, but I grew up in a broken home, and a lot of times, television, movies, TV was a great escape for me. So it was always important to me. And I got, like I said, got sober at 36, and when this came about, I was 40 years old. So I was like, this is something I want to do. This is something I want to put my energy towards. A lot of people thought I was crazy. They were like, look, man, you're 40 years old. Like, you fell off your rocker. You fell off the wagon. You sure this is something that you wanted? And I was like, no, this is something I want to do. And in the beginning, people thought I was nuts. People thought I was crazy. And I put myself into some situations where I could study the craft of acting. I continue to study to this day. And that's how I ended up an actor, you know.
The actor we see today.
The actor you see today, I just started as a background actor and then started doing stand-in work. And I was on set of a film called Antebellum. Janelle Monáe was actually in the lead in that film, and Eric Lange and a lot of brilliant people, Jack Houston. And I was on set that day, and another actor was like, one who had been training as an actor, he's like, are you ever going to study acting? And I was like, I had been doing background work on like NCIS New Orleans, and then I started doing stand-in work, standing in for actors, and I was kind of afraid to take that next kind of step, because you would question ourselves as human beings. Are we good enough? Is this, we're afraid to fail, and so I started studying, and I realized something great about the addiction and trauma part of my life. I realized that I healed from trauma in a healthy way. And I realized that trauma, I'll never forget how certain things made me feel. You never forget how things make you feel. And I realized that I had these feelings that I had dealt with in a healthy way. And I was able to pull those feelings and use them again. Because I remembered how they made me feel, So if it was a scene where it had to be dramatic and I was feeling hopeless and broken. Well, I remember what it was like to be hopeless and broken. You know, I also remember now what it's like to have, hope and courage. So once I understood and got in touch with those feelings, and I was able to pull from previous trauma, real life situations, in a healthy way and put them right back where they go. Then I knew, I was like, hey, I can do this. Like, I can do this. I can become a character. I can relate, these things in my life to this character and make this character. So it kind of all belong together, if that makes sense. It was, I lived a traumatic life. I was hopeless and broken. I healed from trauma. I learned to love myself. And now I'm able to utilize that past in a positive way to tell a story, and give other people, courage and hope.
And that's what your story does. It's a way of continuously paying it forward for others because so many people look at you and they say, if he can do it, I can do it too, right? So that's why I love the gift of storytelling and telling our stories because it can help somebody along the way. Many people we suffer in silence so much, but when we hear someone else saying that sounds similar to what I'm going through, then they can say, "Well, I'm not in it by myself. Therefore, I do have a future. I can turn things around for myself." A while ago, you said that you came from a broken home. Define that for us. What does that? What does that mean for you?
So at an early age, my father was an alcoholic. My mother was a drug addict. She was out the picture when I believe I was in the fourth grade. My father raised us, uh, and my father actually had quit drinking, but he's what in the recovery community we call like he was a dry drunk. So there was a lot of things spiritually he never healed from. And it's that all goes into the kind of character, type of character we are in the recovery community. We have to continue spiritual maintenance. There's a way, there's tools that we got to continue to use every day. I always say that, sobriety is it's like rent, and the rent's due every day. Like, it's something that we have to continue to do every day, sometimes minute by minute, sometimes second by second, sometimes day by day. So I grew up with that in a, their parents had issues with chemicals, and and their parents had issues with
And this
chemicals.
was told to you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've seen my grandfather and grandmother deal with those issues, and then it was told to me their, parents had chemical dependency issues. So it was a long line of chemical dependency and self medication. So that was something that I knew early on, and you would think, growing up around it, you would never want to become that, right? Because I do know a lot of people who has grown up in that environment and they don't become that. They aren't a product of their environment. And I never went back and looked at it. I was this because of my parents, and I was this because of this person and this person. Like, those were my choices. I take full accountability for my choices. And those were decisions that I made. Now I have two children. They're 19 and coming up on 19 and 21. And when I was probably about 9 months sober, I was driving and my daughter was in the car and my son was in the car. And just to show you how this, generational trauma, this curse can be broken, and the understanding of the mind of a child. We were driving and she said, Dad, and this is coming from a 9-year old, were a drug addict and alcoholic, but you don't drink and do drugs anymore. I said, no. She said, and your grandparents and were drug addicts and alcoholics in some way. She's like, but you are, but you stopped. And I was like, yeah, I stopped. And she says, well, that means I don't have to be. And that was like a ton of bricks. And it was then 9 months into my sobriety that I realized that I broke this generational curse that had been passed on genetically, rather be genetically, mentally, physically, however you want to look at it. And she understood that because, I stopped, that she didn't like have to follow that path. And that really hit me really hard. And then her next thing was like, I'm so glad you'll never drink again. And the hardest thing I had to tell her was like, I can't promise you that. But if I do continue to do what I'm supposed to, if I do stay spiritually fit every day and I keep that spiritual maintenance up, I will continue to stay sober. And I have now. I'm coming up on 11 years, and this was like my first year of sobriety. So once you realize what you've done within your inner circle, and you were talking about how people, get inspired, and I had a decision to make, because sobriety at one time, and still is kind of, in drug addiction and alcohol, is a taboo subject. When you start getting into these programs like Alcoholics Anonymous, it's anonymous and it's private and it's closed, and and I swore that I would recover out loud. And that was my decision. I will recover out loud. I will let you know what I'm going through. I will let you know, and I will let anyone. And that's why I continue to stay an open book, because I've helped more people by being, like, I guess, transparent with my struggles, with my addiction, with my recovery, than I would in a room smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee, and to where it's a closed, like, type meeting. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. The 12 steps are a part of my everyday life, but I recover out loud. I want to tell my story. I want to share my story because it has helped a lot of people. In the past 11 years, I've been very fortunate to cross paths with a lot of people's lives who have come to me later on and it said it's helped them. And I can't even count on my hands how many people that I've worked with that are years into sobriety right now. So just to know that one person decided, maybe because it was something I said, maybe it was because they just simply watched my walk. Because when I first got sober, nobody wanted to hear what I had to say. But my walk, my actions proved what I was doing. Just knowing that one person decided to love themselves enough not to drink or do drugs, like, what else can I ask for?
You know, the walk matters. Your walk matters.
And yeah.
It because people are looking at you. You can say one thing but do another. But when you're aligned together with what you're saying and how you're living, right? People take heed to that, and then they can really, focus on self, and really in the sense of, okay, he's okay, so this really can happen, right? We're walking in one, we're talking in one. So I really love the way you said that.
Yo, what's up, everybody? This is your boy Kenny Lewis of Kenny Lewis and One Voice, and you're watching my boy Michael Finkley on the Michael Finkley Show.
Call on Jesus. Looking for some of the best soul food right here in Mullen, South Carolina? I promise you, come on down to Garden Alley.
Our grape salad's fabulous, her water gained, her potato salad, her chicken is fresh, macaroni and cheese is salted to perfection. I haven't found anything that's not great. Best ever.
Banana pudding, cakes, pies. Yeah. Selection is huge. Garden Alley is an awesome place to eat. I really love it.
Come by and see the amazing staff at Garden Alley, downtown Mullins.
Did you ever realize when you found out about your parents, your grandparents, did you realize how it all started with any of them, of how this legacy was started? Was it mental? Was it just circumstantial?
Coming from the culture we come from, south of New Orleans and New Orleans, especially in Louisiana, there's a lot of big drinkers. It's a very sociably acceptable thing, especially generations and generations ago. So that it was a span. It was a lot of different things of just ran in the family as far as genetic gene to alcohol, having a physical and mental obsession and physical addiction to it. Some had to do with mental health. So I know for myself, and I'm pretty sure, probably, for me it was a self-medicating. It was self-medication. there was times in my life where I didn't feel confident. There was times in my life where I had anxiety. There was times and I used either a narcotic or alcohol to, alleviate that, to numb that. So if you start getting into addiction, there's a lot of avenues. Some people self-medicate with drugs and alcohol for, mental disorders. Others do it because of circumstances. So I'm going on both sides of the family. I'm pretty sure that it was a number of those things. I wouldn't know the root cause and why my grandfather drank. Maybe there was some trauma that happened to him when he was a child. Maybe it was just what he knew. I knew his father, my great grandfather, was also a heavy drinker. So that was just a generational thing. Like on my dad's side, his father, heavy drinker, World War II veteran. His father, not so much. So there was some instances where I just skipped a generation. My mom, drug addict. My grandmother, she had her issues. My grandfather, alcoholic. My mom's sister, who's probably one of the closest family met, completely normal. You know, so yeah, her brother had chemical dependency issues. I had chemical dependency issues. So yeah, I guess that in a generational thing like that, it can be circumstance. It could be, but I think it's more of just an individual choice. Like, this is how I'm going to cope with this. Because really, that's what we pick up a drink most of the time, as far as an active alcoholic or people who are in alcoholism, is we picking up the drink to cope with something, or we not wanting to feel something. And it never ends well for us, because the minute we take that drink, we can't stop. It's like once too many, 10,000 ain't enough, rather it be alcohol or a drug. And then we wake up the next morning and we have all this guilt and remorse. And we do it all over again because we don't want to feel the guilt and remorse. So it's this vicious cycle. So I'm sure every individual has their own, reason. I knew what mine was. I got to the root of it. My grandfather died a sober man. He was, my father died a sober man. They weren't, my father wasn't as much into recovery as I am. My grandfather, he was. He was a big advocate of not drinking and stuff. Story of his son died when he was 29 and he was out of state, and he knew. He got on a plane and he was offered alcohol, and he's flying down because he just found out his son had passed away, which would have been my uncle. And the flight attendant offered him a drink, and he turned it down. And even at that age, I think he probably was in his 60s, and he turned that drink down. And I remember my aunt telling me that he had told her, he said, "I knew when I turned that drink down that I would never touch alcohol again." And he had been sober for years. But if he had one opportunity, it would have been right there. And I always think about that when life gets tough. I always think about the decision my grandfather made when he got a phone call that his son passed away, from, accidental overdose. So I always think about the sheer will and commitment to oneself not to pick up a drink that he felt in that moment, because he just lost a child, which I can't imagine. So I always think about that when life gets rough. Like, this is what he was dealing with, and he didn't pick up a drink. I had a bad day. That's nothing. I can make it better right now. So yeah, and getting back to our walk, I tell my children that our walk is everything, because when I got sober, whatever I said, no one cared. No one cared what I had to say, because for 20 plus years, all they knew was a manipulative alcoholic and drug addict. So I kept my mouth shut, and I listened, and I walked the walk. I didn't talk. I walked the walk. And, my walk is what made me today. And it only not did it in sobriety, but my walk in this film industry. I've gotten great jobs just because of the person I am. I've gotten great jobs just because of the way I carry myself on a set, my work ethic, my punctuality, my professionalism. So our walk, I think, goes a long way in life. We could say whatever we want, but until you see it, I don't know about you. People could tell me what they want, but I got to see it to believe it,
Yeah.
And that's what I want people, for me.
My words are listening, as my best friend always says. So that happens. Believe it or not, that definitely happens. Your younger self. When did you realize, as a youngster, or even as a teen, whenever this happened for you, that I liked alcohol and/or drugs? When did that phase come to you?
So I was very young. I was very young, and this was after speaking to my mother, and there was two incidents I can remember, and I won't stay too long on them because they're kind of like war stories. But when I was probably about between 4 and 5 years old, I had got some work done in my ears, my tubes in my ears put in. It's something that when people have like nasal problems and usually sinus type infections, and they'll put some tubes in the ears because they'll have to drain it out. And when that was done, the doctor had gave my mother a bottle of codeine. Now I was young, like really young, and after speaking to my mother about this, I can kind of remember like faint memories of like when I finished that bottle of codeine, I wanted more. So at that point, I was really kind of too young to understand, but like I remember it making me feel good and wanting more. Fast forward to, and I kicked and screamed for it. Like she told me, she was like, "You were crying for it." She's like, "I had to," and this was the drug addict part of my mother. She's like, "I had to call the doctor and get you another bottle." Now this is the early '80s, so who kind of it's not like now, so like the early '80s, they didn't think about it. Oh, it's just some codeine, like let me give him some codeine. So fast forwarded to, I guess, about 11 years old. Uh, I drank like for the first time. I think it was like 11. And I remember the feeling. It gave me such a feeling of like ease and comfort. And for once, I felt normal, because I was coming out of my parents' marriage who had failed. My mom had, at that point, had left and she was gone. My dad was raising us. I was a lot smaller than other kids. I was just this tiny little guy who was obviously had some self-esteem issues, obviously had lack of confidence. I was a funny guy. That was my way of kind of coping with things. I would joke a lot and make fun of myself a lot. And I remember drinking, and I felt what I thought at the time was normal. And I'll never forget that. We're having some kind of big ball, they would have a Mardi Gras ball, or it was this festival they were having, and I remember the grown ups were leaving like bottles of champagne on the table, and me and my buddy we stole some bottles and we went like hide, and we were drinking and drinking, and I'll never forget the ease and comfort at that time, and for once I felt normal, what I thought was normal. So I was probably about 11 when I figured out that, hey, this stuff makes me feel good, right? And growing up, I didn't know what feeling good was, but that made me feel good. Just like I didn't know what love was. I remember being in treatment for the last time because I'd been to many treatment centers, and I cracked a joke. I remember telling one of the counselors, I was like, I must have missed in school that day when they taught you how to love yourself, because I just didn't know how, like, at all. Then I found out that I was of worth and value, and I found out that I could love myself, and but going back, at 11-year-old boy, completely brain undeveloped, with feelings, and especially inner feelings, and self awareness, no awareness at all. I knew that that liquid made me feel good, and that's all I knew. So that continued with alcohol and through high school, other drugs, a little bit of college, which I didn't last long, other drugs. And I knew that, and then it was fun for a while, you know. Then it became not fun, and then it became a very unfun problem, if that makes sense. And then once it became a problem, it just stayed a problem, and it got, it would continue to be a worse problem and a worse problem and a worse problem, and I would, this relationship was destroyed, this job was lost, I lied to this person, or I took advantage of this situation, and you just become really not a good person, to where it was a point to where your family is kind of like just tolerating you, and then they just kind of cut you off. And I think one of the hardest things that my father ever told me, and I loved my father dearly, is he said, "I'd much rather you," he said, "in the graveyard," he said, "than here on this earth." He said, "I love you." He said, "but at least I know where you are." He said, "I know you're safe." And that was a lot to digest. That was a lot to digest. And I buried my father in 2021 in the same place he talked about me being buried, because we had a family type plot. And I thought about that a lot that day. And I was like, he really loved me that much, And now that I've grown and I've matured and I'm an older man, and my sobriety is strong, and I understand the value of a child and understand the value of a relationship with your child. Like I said, I have two amazing children who have not followed my footsteps, thank God. Who come to me and say, "Dad, you've taught me a lot, and you've taught me how to overcome, and you've taught me how to do this, and you've taught me how to do that." And I was blessed, but I understand what my father was telling me, as harsh as it sounds, because I think if they were in that position for my own comfort and their peace, I understood what my father was trying to tell me, and let's hope to God I never have to make that decision, or feel like that my father had to feel, that I put my father through, So at a young age, 11 was when I was a baby, You're 11 years old, you're a baby.
Walter Fauntleroy. I play Sam on Tyler Perry's The Oval. And you're watching the Michael Finkley Show.
Hello everybody, it's Finkley from the Finley Experience. We're an educational consulting firm that specializes in first generation education. So we assist students with their college and career endeavors. We train school administrators on the state of first generation students. And also we partner with colleges and universities to assist their first generation population for easy transition from high school to college. So if you're looking for a presenter or a speaker that presents on these topics and so much more, visit our website at thefinkleyexperience.com and learn about all that we do. We're looking forward to working with you.
Hi guys, welcome to Awaken. We wanted to serve the city of Mullins. We are church owned, and we felt like a coffee shop was such a huge need in the city of Mullins. There's nowhere for people to just come, get a cup of coffee, sit with friends, maybe do some work on the laptop. And so we feel like it was a service that we could give back to the city. Well, our hope is that people will feel calm, that they'll feel welcome, that it'll be a place where they can come and just clear their mind.
We come here twice a day. That's how good their smoothies, their coffee, their lattes, frappes, delicious. I would love the atmosphere here. If I had time to come and just sit and relax, I would. It's awesome.
One thing that I really love about it being here is just the cozy environment. It's so inviting. I can come in here and I can get my schoolwork done, a good coffee and a good meal. But I'm just really thankful that they're here and that I have a good place to go.
We're open Tuesday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. and Saturday from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Awaken Coffee Bar, downtown Mullins.
What would you tell your 11-year-old self today?
Oh man, I've gotten I've got asked this question a few times, and I would love to say like you are worth and value, love yourself, you know, but I don't think I would have understood it, and I probably sure in the hell want to listen to myself. uh, you know, I'd love to go back, but I can't. I truly believe that every choice I've made and everything that's ever happened to me made me the man I am today and has given me the life I have today. So honestly, I don't think there's anything I could have told that kid. I think that kid had to go through his trials and tribulations to turn into the man he is today. So it's a tough question, and I'd love to go and hug him and tell him it's gonna. I'm sorry. And tell him it's gonna be okay. You know. Um, but I truly believe that he went through what he had to go through to get to where he is. And by the grace of God, he didn't end up in a graveyard.
I love that answer. I really do because I've been asked that, down through the years, and I wish I would never change anything because I feel that if I would change one thing, I wouldn't be the person I am today. So I'm like, I'm
Exactly.
not messing with that. I'm not messing with that. No, 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 because I love me now. I love me now. So I had to go. All that was necessary.
Yes.
No, it was bad was necessary. Your struggles, your experiences, even though bad, sometimes good, all the above, it was necessary.
Definitely.
It was
I
all
completely agree with you.
oh my word. And I love the way that even now, right, we see this big tough dude fulfilling his dream of going into acting. And in this short amount of time that you've been acting, what has been one of your greatest pleasures?
Uh there's so many, I've worked with some amazing people. I've worked with some really beautiful human beings. I think just storytelling, I mean, besides what people like to hear, like, man, I got to share a scene with Brandon T. Jackson. I got to work with Will Smith. I got to share a scene with Bryan Cranston. I got, people, that's what people want. But I think, honestly, acting has been very therapeutic for me. It's helped me to reach potential as a human being that I didn't know I had. So I think my biggest I don't even know if I would use the word pleasure. I would say just the experiences I've had, the happiness, because pleasure is so short lived. I feel the word when we have a pleasure, it's like eating a steak and it's good and it's like, and then it goes away, but I feel like it brings this happiness to me. And I'll go back with my partner, every now and then. I'm like, it's like maybe because I didn't expect to get this far. I'm just a recovering drug addict, alcoholic, oil field worker, Cajun guy from the bayou, and sometimes it gets overwhelming, and I'll be like, I was like, I think about just giving it all up and just living some kind of normalcy, and she said, you'll never be able to do that. Because I think she sees how passionate I am about it and how much happiness and joy it brings to me to like develop a character and tell a story. And I love being on a film set. Like I absolutely love being on a film set. I get to leave not this Monday coming, but next, and I get to leave for 2 weeks and have a principal role in this like really great movie that was really written great and great writing, great cast, and it's so I guess my biggest pleasure is getting to do it because it brings me happiness. And I think like everybody loves an underdog, man. I wasn't supposed to make it this far, so I think at the same time that it must, what brings me pleasure is when people reach out to me and they're like, how can I do this? How can I do this? Like this is something I always wanted to do. Like how can I do it? And I'm there, a guy who started late in his age, in it. and I'm there to help them take the necessary steps. So that brings me a lot of pleasure also, is helping others get into it if they can handle it, because it takes a special kind of person in this to continue in this industry. You have to have a drive that you have to have a drive and be able to, and thick skin, and be able to take rejection. So
Well, show me the ropes.
oh,
Show
whenever you're ready.
me the ropes. Oh my word! And I must say, have you faced any within your acting career thus far, any scenes that may have triggered your past?
um No, honestly. Honestly, if anything, my past has helped me bring, I've played drug addicts, I played alcoholics, I played abusive alcoholics. Um, I think that, we touched on this earlier. I think because I've healed in a healthy way, properly, from not only the things that have been done to me, but the harm that I may have caused others, and things that I may have witnessed. That when I go ahead and I do a scene that contains, you know, that contains, maybe alcoholism or anger, or things that I used to deal with as an alcoholic. I think that it helps me be better in the scene. But like I tell a lot of other actors who are up and coming, is like, if you're gonna use that, make sure you do it in a healthy way. Because when I first started acting, there was certain things that I had to, um, I would go and like say like do a scene as an alcoholic, an angry, a mean, abusive alcoholic. It would take me a couple days to like get back into that me mind frame. You know, Not that I would go and have a drink, but I would find myself agitated. And with no resolve from it. So I had to really like, and I've gotten so much better at it, because I can go and I could do a scene and I could walk away and I'm back to being just Hick, the guy who's smiling and laughing, and So I don't think I was ever triggered to the point to where like it affected me mentally, or in a way that I felt like I would probably have to, use or anything like that. But in the beginning, when I was really learning about myself as an actor and how to control these emotions and how to use these emotions in a healthy way, I did notice myself. It took a lot longer for me to get back to me, if that makes any sense.
It does make perfect sense. I definitely believe in the power of forgiveness, especially in this world, in this life that we live in. I've learned that it's important for me, not for the other person, but it's for me to grow and continue to grow into the person I need to be in my future and in my ladder. Have you forgiven yourself? Have you forgiven your parents, your grandparents?
Oh, definitely. I've never really held them account. Like, I've never blamed them. Like, I learned early on, in my sobriety, that these were all decisions that I made. 90% of the time when I actually listed down the people that I thought had harmed me, or these like really crappy situations that I was in, was a lot of my own doing. These are problems that I caused. But we so delusional in drug addiction and alcoholism that we don't see. So yeah, for me to move forward and stay sober, I had to learn to forgive myself. You know,
Even
um,
as a 4 year old, even as an 11 year old, you had to forgive yourself.
well, yeah, I mean, my mom was sick. She was a sick person like I was. She didn't have the privilege of understanding sobriety and understanding accountability, you know, and she was a sick person. Of course, I forgive her. I mean, she had no understanding of that, you know. Once I realized that God had forgave me, I had to start working on self forgiveness. You talked about how we do it for us, and I always say that it's you can forgive a person, you can forgive yourself, but if we go seeking forgiveness, all we can do is try, sorries don't matter. Change behavior does. We could say, what can I do to make this right? And I had to go through a lot of that. I had to go through that. What can I do to make this right? I can't say sorry, because sorry is a word. I could, my walk, change my actions. What can I do to make this right? Some people were like, there's nothing you can do to make it right. Well, you know what? My side of the street is clean. And that's what's important. Is yes, you got that stuff, that junk swept off your side of the street, right? Me, my side. I can't make a person forgive me. I can forgive me, but with forgiveness, I think comes an understanding. Say that I wronged you, and I come to you and I said, "Look, man, I'm sorry. I was a drug addict, alcoholic. I didn't know what I was doing. I was out of my head." And you're like, "Well, bro, I don't want nothing to do with you." You know, in order for me to walk away from that situation, knowing I tried, I have to really understand the pain I caused you. You have to be very aware of that. You can't just say, you know what? All right, well, I know I hurt you. What can I do to make it right? Well, there's nothing you can do. But man, it's in God's hands after that. We can't change somebody's mind, but we could clean our side of the street, like, hey, I caused you some pain, like I caused you pain, like, and you explain to them what you did, and you could try, and they might be like, you know what? And there was few people that I went to, and they didn't want to hear it. There were some that I thought would never talk to me again, and all these people wanted to do was see me be better. You think they hate you, you think that they'll condemn you, but if they see you doing better, that's all they wanted. I went to some people that are royally over, right? And I was like, look, I'm wrong. I was wrong. And this is what I did. And I live with it every day of my life. And I just want to know, what can I do to make it right? And some of their responses were, just keep staying sober. You want to talk about grace? That is God's grace. So yeah, I forgave myself a long time ago. I did. I had to, because if I didn't, I would just be poison walking around. I had to. And the ones who didn't, there's nothing I could possibly do about that. Which I'm pretty lucky, because like all my relationships were built. They're better than they ever were, even with people that I had wronged. So I was very blessed in that. But there was a couple who was just like, sorry, man, we done. And I had to understand that, I had to understand that. And I had to, sometimes they say acceptance is the answer to all our problems. It truly is. It truly is. There's some things that you just have to accept, especially when it was your doing. So once I understood, God forgave me. And I started to try to right a lot of wrongs. Forgiveness, self-forgiveness started to kick in. And if you love yourself, you'll forgive yourself.
Oh, what a journey. What a journey. Season 8 here on the Michael Finkley Show, we talk about the aspect of dreams. This is our dream season. What is your next biggest dream?
Wow. I just want to leave a legacy, of strength, courage, and hope. No matter if it's me being a father, me being a partner in a relationship, me being an actor, I just want to leave that legacy of strength, courage, and hope. I guess my next big dream is, I wish that nobody would ever feel hopeless. That's that's what I wish. And I only could do so much about that. But as far as like my career, man, I don't know. I just want to wake up every day and do what I'm doing. I book some, I don't book some. I get a guest star, I don't get a guest star. I get a co-star, I don't get a co-star. I get a lead, I don't get a lead. You know, it's just it's life, and I guess if I had to pinpoint one thing, it would probably be serial killer and a psychological thriller. Because it's
Let's
just completely
go.
opposite
Let's
of me.
go.
So if we're talking about roles, we talk about my partner, her and I talk about it often. Like, what would be like the ultimate role for me? Because I'm real. I always play a bad guy, right? I always play a villain. I always play a mean guy, and I'm not like that in life, like at all. Which surprise, like a lot of people that know me, they're like, "Oh my God, you're so mean, you're so mean." Like, and like, we know you in person, you're not like that. I'm like, well, it's acting. I get paid to be mean. But that, I guess that would be like one of my I always talk about this with her, my dream roles. Something like Seven or something. Like some dark psychological thriller. But yeah. I mean, all around, my next dream is I just want to wake up tomorrow, man. That's it.
Daily dream. I love it.
Daily dream. Just wake up
Daily
breathing
dream.
and healthy.
Daily dream. When you said Hollywood's bad guy, you reminded me of Jasper Cole.
Jasper Cole.
Yes, he's also an actor as well, and he's always playing that bad role in things, and I'm like, you're not like that at all. So you reminded me of him when you said that.
Oh yeah.
Like, oh no, you're not. You play it. You just play it on TV. You just play it on TV. I love it. After all that you've been through, are you truly proud of yourself?
Yes. Yeah. That's something that I can wholeheartedly say. Um, that I'm proud of myself. Sometimes I forget, and I have this beautiful human being in my life, and she reminds me that I should be proud of myself. I guess in the beginning I was a little hard on myself. We tend to judge ourselves, and we tend to take things a little bit too serious. She's always there to kind of ground me, and it's not that big of a deal, and you need to be really proud of yourself, and yeah. So I'm I think who we surround ourselves is important with. The people we surround ourselves is so important. So yes, I'm proud of myself, and if I'm ever feeling different, I have two amazing children and a girlfriend who reminds me of that.
That's all you need.
Yeah, all you need.
That's all you need. I love it. So I know that the story will continue even after this episode of the Michael Finkley Show. So how can the Fink fam follow you on social media?
Oh, you can follow me on Hick Cheramie _actor on Instagram, and I'm Hick Cheramie on Facebook. I don't do TikTok. I don't do Snapchat. I'm lucky I do Instagram and Facebook, but we live in a world where you have to stay relevant in this industry, and that's a big part of it. You can follow me there, and you can also follow my upcoming projects on my social media platforms and IMDb, of course. And I think that's the only social media I really have.
All right, Hick, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
To share your story with us as well, but you have to come back.
Yes, I would be honored. Please.
All right, you heard it, Fink fam. He's coming back. He's coming back. But thank you so much again for just being who you are. Please
Thank you.
Please don't change.
I won't.
All right, don't do it. And Fink fam, thank you so much for watching as well. And remember to always pursue your dreams. Have a good one.